Arrivescam is about to have the lid blown right off of it as I sit down with Conservative MP Stephanie Kusie. And boy, does she have a lot to tell us today. Let's get into it.
Oh, yeah!
Well, ladies and gentlemen, as promised, this week joining me to talk about Arrivescam and everything happening within the hearings going on with the corruption in $80,000 apps that turn into um, $80 million apps. Joining me live on the channel today, Stephanie Kusie from the Conservative Party riding in Mindapore. Stephanie, how are you? Welcome to the channel.
I'm great, Derek. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's my pleasure to have you here. First off, I wanted to thank you for everything you and the Conservatives have been up to. Again, I've been watching a lot of the live streams in the House of Commons during question period. I've been watching a lot of the inquiry going on with Arrivescam, with the newly found lab incident in Winnipeg. Of course, we all know that got shut down by the Liberals and the NDP earlier this week. But I wanted to talk to you about Arrivescam because what we see on the internet or what we see from mainstream media, again, doesn't even scratch the surface as to what is happening in terms of where we can see, I guess, investigations going forward. Now, I caught Michael Barrett's video last week or about a week and a half ago stating that a subpoena had been issued to GC Strategies, that they had, I believe it was somewhere in the vicinity of 30 days to testify, or else they would be dragged in handcuffs. I know Andrew Scheer had mentioned that. Is that still moving forward? Have they responded to that at all?
Yeah, that's a great question. Again, thank you so much, Derek, for having me. But this is definitely an issue that has seized both Canadians as well as the Government Operations Committee and then Public Accounts Committee as well. I actually sat on Public Accounts the last 2 days where we continued our investigation into Arrivescam. And you're right as to the point as to where it's at. For those who need a reminder, Arrivescam is an app that was supposed to cost $80,000 that we were told by GC Strategies last year cost $16 million. We later found out that it cost $54 million. It gets worse than that, Derek, for our viewers. The Auditor General released her report almost 3 weeks ago now. I think it was 3 weeks ago. And we found out that it cost a minimum of $60 million. And I say a minimum because documentation in Arrivescam was so bad. They actually think that it might have cost more than $60 million. And $12 million of that $60 million, they can't even attribute to task authorizations, actual written work for Arrivescam. So, this is something that has seized Parliament that Canadians are interested in because it is just such a blatant waste of taxpayer dollars. The Auditor General said so herself, that Canadians did not give value for money here. She said that a pandemic, a crisis situation was not an excuse for this type of abuse of taxpayer funds. And actually, the Comptroller for Canada yesterday agreed with that in Public Accounts. But you're right, the plot thickens. Just when you think it can't get any more crazy or any worse, it does. We found out yesterday, or I should say earlier this week, but it was confirmed yesterday and discussed yesterday in committee, that one of the principals of Dalian, one of the organizations that GC Strategies was working with, was actually working as a contractor or as a public servant for the Department of National Defense at the same time that they were receiving money from Arrivescam. They were double dipping. Absolutely unbelievable. It gets worse and worse and worse. And you're right. Last week, Conservatives did put forward in Government Operations Committee a motion 2 weeks ago now, to have GC Strategies appear within 30 days. And that motion is coming to pass in the near future. And they are scheduled to come to committee next week. Okay. They're scheduled to come to Operations Committee. So we are very excited to see what the next step is. As yesterday, you may have seen the news from the President of the Treasury Board of Canada. There are some restrictions that have been placed upon GC Strategies, but not an outright ban of this two-person company working out of their basement that got $60 million from Canadian taxpayers for this app, and with criminal possibilities as well. Admittedly, identity forging with forged resumes to win, lying to get government contracts. So they are still scheduled currently, Derek, to come in front of Government Operations Committee next week and to be accountable to committee, to Parliament, and most importantly, to Canadians.
Absolutely. Now, getting into that, and part of what I wanted to ask was last week's vote for, I guess you could say, transparency on everything that's going out from Arrivescam, from promotions that were given out, from every cent being tracked, and then the government, the Liberal government, being tasked to recoup those costs. Now, I guess my question, with that happening, what are the odds now when GC Strategies does sit down in committee that we're going to see any attempt of a Liberal or NDP shutdown, similar to what we've seen in the past when certain individuals are being questioned?
That's a very good question. And I think that we are seeing it on a regular basis. We saw it on just, in fact, this morning at Public Accounts Committee, where my colleague Garnet Genuis had put forward a motion to have the president of the Treasury Board come forward to committee and trying to pin this on some minister to take accountability for what happened here. Obviously, no Liberal minister wants to take accountability because that's what they do. They shirk responsibility. But we saw the Liberals trying to filibuster this motion out throughout the morning, and the chair was able to secure resources for another 7 hours. And I think that the Liberals thought about filibustering for 7 hours, looked at the votes and recognized that they were going to be on the losing side of it. And so this motion passed, but that was another example of the filibustering that this government does. And as to your point about this motion, which would hopefully see the recoupment of funding for Arrivescam, it may have passed in the House, but we have seen other motions pass in the House, and the government takes no action upon them. And you mentioned one of them, the most famous one, the Winnipeg lab documents. There was a motion that passed in the House to get those documents, and this government went so far as to having a departmental head come and be shamed at the door of the House of Commons rather than produce the documents, take responsibility, to show some accountability. They actually did that instead. Another example we saw in the House was the passing of the motion to have the IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, put on the terrorist list of Canada. This was passed in the House. And again, the government took no action. And this is actually a tactic that they use now, Derek, is that they will pass that if one of their dance partners aren't available, whether it's the Bloc or the NDP, most notably the NDP, but the Bloc has been there dancing with them as well. They will let the motion pass, but they will not take action on the motion. So this is definitely another tactic that they use, but you're absolutely correct in saying that filibustering is another. We saw it this morning.
Right, and I guess that's my concern, is that when I talk to my viewing audience or when I read the comments, anytime we cover what's happened with Arrivescam, anything like when you go back to the Aga Khan or even the We Charity scandal, when we talk about what's happening here, people now have the nickname of Teflon Trudeau, that essentially he skates on everything. I guess the concern of my audience is, what realistically are we going to see? Because we've had videos yesterday showing Justin Trudeau quoting that, hey, anybody who's lined their pockets over the pandemic and taken advantage of those trying to save lives are going to face repercussions for what they've done. So essentially, Justin Trudeau saying he himself should be arrested, because we all know where his wealth was attained during the pandemic. But I guess my question is are we going to see something akin to a threat of what was the sponsorship scandal in terms of the possibility of arrests? Are we going to see anything aside from recoup? Because Canadians, I can tell you right now, while they're struggling to fill their fridges, while they're struggling to decide if they turn on their lights or keep their kids fed, pay their mortgages, and the government's running around with $80 million of taxpayer money, Canadians are asking for justice, essentially. And I guess most of my audience keeps saying it's never going to happen, it's never going to come. And their biggest concern is, what precedent does this set for future governments, that it's just this easy to take money away from Canadians, that it's now we see a stop put to it. So I guess my question is what are the likelihood of any kind of charges or repercussions, as Justin Trudeau calls it, coming towards those involved?
Yeah, I think that's another great question. And even in committee this morning, we had an actual Liberal member of the committee say, this is not the job of ministers to oversee the machinery of government. That's absolutely ridiculous. That is exactly the job of ministers, to see what's happening, make sure that things are getting done, and they're getting done in a responsible and cost-effective manner for the Canadian people. But I too am very concerned about the ramifications and the actual outcomes. I mean, look at how this government treats serial killers. Gives them hockey rinks and puts them in medium security prisons, these types of things. So I wouldn't expect a lot. I actually brought up another example this morning, Derek, of something similar that you are describing. So the Deputy Minister for Procurement and Public Works indicated that she was very proud that there had actually been 5 public servants who had been deemed to have been found responsible for having some type of conflict of interest with their position with the government of Canada. So something that we're evaluating with Dalian, the principal from Dalian currently. And she was very proud to say that these 5 public servants who'd been found in conflict of interest with their jobs were dismissed. They were fired, as they should be. We've got a lot of great public servants here in Canada, but these 5 had a conflict of interest and they were fired, as they should have been. Yet we also have the president of the Treasury Board, whose husband, who is on a company that received millions of dollars during the pandemic, and she never declared that conflict of interest before these millions of dollars were awarded. So if these public servants who serve below her were held to this standard, why isn't she held to this same standard? Mm-hmm. But to your point, do we ever see anything more for this prime minister than a slap on the wrist, a small fine compared to his inherited net worth? The truth of the matter is we don't, and no one knows better than your viewership that there are rules for thee, but not for me. I think this is a fundamental understanding of those who watch Unacceptable Fringe, and so I wouldn't expect anything, and very little in terms of responsibility and actions and punishment for the ministers who were in charge and were held responsible, and for the vendors. If anything is done, it will just be as a result of the good work of the opposition and the government trying to do as they usually do: too little, too late. They're always too little, too late, trying to sort of cover over things, redo things, when really Canadians know the truth about their intentions, their unwillingness to stand up for the value of Canadian taxpayers' hard-earned money and for the value of justice, as you know. So I wouldn't expect a lot, but fundamentally, the ultimate test, or the ultimate justice, is a new government. And I do believe we will see a new government within the next 18 months. I believe it'll be a Pierre Poilievre government. I'll be very proud to be a member of that government. And for me, that is the ultimate courtroom, the ultimate decision of the Canadian people, the ultimate reading or decision is an election, and frankly, Derek, it can't come soon enough.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I know you're pressed for time, Stephanie, so we'll wrap up there. And again, we will be following up on the channel, ladies and gentlemen, with Stephanie's colleagues as well, when we talk about Larry Brock, Michael Barrett, Garnet. Is it Genuis? Is that how you pronounce this last name?
I think so. Yes.
I always say Genui because I'm used to being in French Canadian, and I mess it up horribly. So hopefully we can sit down with those individuals, because you guys are doing the great work. And I for one, as a conservative Albertan, I applaud you guys for everything that you are doing. I thank you for coming on this channel, and I'm in the same boat that thinks that we need to axe the tax, build the homes, stop the crime, and bring it home. And I can't tell you how forward I am looking to a Poilievre government in 2025. I've been asking for it since back in the days when Pierre was finance minister. So I think it's going to be fantastic. I think you're going to do great with the party. And again, I thank you so much for coming on this channel and spending some time with us and kind of shedding some light on what we can expect in the future. Stephanie Kusie, thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me, Derek.
Thanks so much.